Hello, I'm Dr. John Cruz. I'm a psychiatrist in San Francisco, and for the last 25 years, I've been helping people with adults with ADHD understand and deal with their ADHD. I'm also the author of this book, Recognizing Adult ADHD. And today is my first Facebook Live presentation, so I'm happy to have feedback about either the content or the presentation and production values themselves. The plan for today is for me to be talking for about 15 or 20 minutes and then answering any questions people have on any specific aspect I touch on today. And if this is successful, hopefully the next several Fridays at 11 Pacific time, I'll be doing related topics. So the topic today is tips and guidelines for those with ADHD working from home. Many of them are applicable to other people as well, and they're also applicable for people with ADHD in some other situations. As a starting place, I'm working from an blog or tweet that Caitlin Bowden had presented, which is 16 tips on ADHD from working from home or from telecommuting. This appeared in Attitude magazine, and for those of you who aren't already aware of and using this resource, Attitude magazine, and they're at attitudemag.com, is a wonderful resource for people with ADHD. They have information on testing and screening for ADHD. They have information on treatment. Right now they have a collection of different blogs of other individuals dealing with working from home or living from home under shelter-in-place conditions. They do have an annual magazine that there is a subscription rate for, but many of the resources on their site are available free for anyone who checks in. So I don't have any professional affiliation or connection with them, but they do vet their material. It is good and accurate and helpful. So again, Attitude magazine is something I'd recommend. So when I looked at Caitlin Bowden's 16 tips, many of them struck me as good pieces of advice, and she herself is dealing with ADHD. They actually, when taken as a whole, it seemed rather scattered, and some of them were redundant. So I took license and I reorganized her material in a substantially different way, and I think her topics fit into three main groups and with two additional side points. So I'm going to start with sort of the side points or things that weren't connected to her other major three themes. The first one she emphasizes is to take your medications. So I know some people are used to taking the medications when they go into their work days and skipping them on weekends. And so you're sort of home now. That feels like a weekend. She strongly urges, and I support, that if you're on medications and taking them regularly, that should be continuing when you're sheltering in place at home. Interesting, there was a study published just this week in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry providing documentary evidence that those people who've been doing well or getting benefits from medications show a decrease not just in performance or functioning, but also in quality of life if they abruptly stop their medications. So particularly when you're going into work or had coworkers around you or people to remind you, structure your time, help things go, now when that's absent, it's even more important to be taking your medications. So that was one side point. The second side point she brings up is to keep active. So many people, are sheltering in small places. They may be feeling inundated by their workload, again, having less help with structure or flow to get it done, or feeling scared or anxious or depressed or having other distractors to keep them from doing work. What we know is that exercise, so I recommend sort of exercise or activity in two different aspects. One is we know it's not an optimal style to be sitting for hours uninterruptedly in a sedentary way. So do break up your work periods, at least every hour, getting up, walking around, doing something briefly for 5 to 15 minutes, depending on what you need. But doing it something physically, whether it's marching in place, dancing to a few tunes. And separate from that, if you can find a way to do at least 20 minutes of a little more vigorous exercise at least 3 or 4 times a week, that seems to have tremendous benefits for decreasing the likelihood of falling into depression or anxiety. And many people with ADD have noticed and can report that physical activity has beneficial effects for them. So again, if your regular gym routine is blocked, there are still dozens and dozens of fitness or calisthenic exercise web presentations that you can, if it helps to have music, if it helps to have someone guiding you, that's good. If you can get out of the house, apartment, place you're in, and go walking, running, biking, those are all great. Again, please remember, keep social distancing when you do get out of the house. So remaining active is important. So the three big themes that she addresses, and I'll go through them one at a time, are maintaining and managing your space while you're working from home, maintaining and managing your time when you're working from home, and maintaining and managing your social connections when you're working from home. So I'll tackle space first. So Caitlin's strong advice and what I would support is having a separate, discrete space that is just for your work. If you have really confined corners, it may just be a portion of your bed during the daytime, so fractioning it both in space and in time. It may be a corner of someone else's desk. I mean, optimally, you'd have your own room or desk to work from, but if you have it more confined or you're sharing space with multiple people this time, at least mark out your own space that is specifically for work. When you're doing work, go to that space, use that space. Don't get into the habit of starting off on something and wandering off into other areas. And another really big one, so this workspace is sort of your safe haven within your safe haven. We're all sheltering in place to avoid exposure to the coronavirus. And within that larger haven, you want to sequester a safe, secure space where when you're there, you're going to be focusing on work, and other people around you, if you are sharing your space with others, will know you are in working mode, you're not to be disturbed right now. And the final aspect of this safe space or working space is to remember to clean it up at the end of each day. I know particularly people with ADHD, when they're done, they want to be out of it. Keeping track of details or keeping things organized is an added chore for people with ADHD. But the benefits of doing it is, one is if you keep up with it each day, then you don't have a huge sprawling mess at the end of the week. Two, if you keep it nice and tidy, I mean, the biggest point is that things are organized, accessible where you need them, when you want them, when you are in that working space. And three, one of the biggest deterrents to getting motivated and involved in work is if you go see the workspace you're about to work in is a haphazard, scattered mess. So cleaning up at the end of the day is a gift you can do to yourself so you're prepared for the next day. So that's the tips and advice on that sort of workspace realm that I have to say for now. And again, any questions will be welcome on that. The second big theme she has is time, and time management we know is a particular challenge for people with ADHD. So one of her recommendations is to keep a timer going. I mean, right now I have a clock at the upper corner of my computer, but even more than just having a clock, it's extremely useful to have an alarm system so that every hour or whatever interval works for you, you are reminded to check in with what is what you're doing right now, what you want to be doing. And the particular worry there is particularly if you drift away from your workspace or go to the kitchen to get some water or go to the bathroom, it's easy to get involved, or taking one of the exercise breaks we mentioned earlier. It's really easy for someone with ADHD, particularly since that may be a more fun or interesting or distracting activity, to not just take 10 minutes dancing to music, but to take an hour or 2 hours, or start looking up new dance moves or new dances, or have different people across the world that are doing the same dance, and if you have a time reminder, that can help you check in, wait a minute, I need to get back to work. Similarly, within work, many people with ADHD have hyper-focusing abilities and get so sucked in or glommed on or pursuing one certain train of thought so assiduously, so devotedly, that they're completely oblivious to what time it is. So again, having periodic alarms, reminders to get you to remind yourself of what else you might be doing. And I think next week's talk or discussion is going to be more specifically on scheduling and why and how that is so important. But you want to make sure, again, that you're checking on yourself so you're not getting trapped in either productive rabbit holes or even more particularly unproductive rabbit holes where you're chasing material or chasing things and not being able to find an answer, and then but still not getting yourself out of that train of thought. And then sort of particularly at a bigger scale than just the tasks during the day, she strongly recommends, and I would support, having a clear boundary at the end of the day of when your work is finished so that you can put away the laptop, or if it's a corner of the bed, put away your files, put away your material, and sort of return to the rest of the world. So I've had some people I'm working with say, I have no life now. I have no friends. I have no connections. I have nothing outside of work. And what I tried to say is, yes, you're not able to go out and, party with friends, hug your mother, do other things you might have been able to do before. But almost all of us, either whether it's through internet connections or even phone calls, you do still have a life outside of work. And nurturing it, cherishing it, making it clear that there are limits on how much work is possible for anyone to do a day, and it's not going to be sustainable if you don't create time, space, energy for those non-work activities. And related to the time aspect, part of ADD often is focusing on what's right in front of your face, and so looking at the tree so closely you forget that you're in a forest or looking at the whole world. One of the strong reminders is that when we're in this period of coronavirus crisis, I've worked with many people, not just with ADHD, but many people sort of feel like we are locked in this state forever, our civilization's imploded, this is where we are. And yes, this is where we are at the moment, but the important reminder, things to hold on to is step back away from the tree you're staring at and remember, we will be back to some world post-coronavirus at some time. Yes, it's hard not knowing whether it will be a few weeks, a few months, or many months. And uncertainty is harder to deal with for human brains than definite bad things, but the world will get through this. As horrible as it will be, even the worst case scenarios suggest that at least 98 to 99% of us will get through this alive. So yes, thousands, even, one life lost is horrible, sad, and tragic. Thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even worldwide, millions is even more horrible and tragic. But the vast, vast majority of us will get through this time. It feels interminable. It feels like this is all we have right now, but there is a bigger world out there. So I've touched on time concerns, space concerns, and her other third topic of tips all fell into the category of social aspects of it. So one of her first ones is to set up clear boundaries, what your workspace is physically. And it may be helpful, particularly a spouse, a partner, family members, children, to even put do not disturb signs around your space, because they will be seeing you as a person. You're there, it seems like you're accessible or immediate, but if you're trying to work, your own brain is prone to distractions enough. You don't need them to come into your space adding distractions. Sort of an exception or variation to that is I've had some people with ADHD who are talking about, again, we talked about the alarm system for not getting sucked into work too intently, but I've had people who still did, and it was helpful to have a roommate, to have a partner who came in and said, you know, it's 12:30, your lunchtime should have started half an hour ago. You need to break up what you're doing, or at the end of the day, you know, time out. This is time to put everything away. So set boundaries with the people, or you might be sharing your shelter in space with, telling them, you know, don't bother me when I'm working, but if I'm not taking a break for lunch, if I'm not stopping at the end of the day, yes, come get me, come pull me out of what I'd be locked into. The second tip or reminder she has for people in this is a difficult time for the world, this is a difficult time for all of us, this is a time to be nice to yourself. Many of you may have worked from home before for brief periods or for, you know, one day a week. It's a very different scenario to be doing that day after day after day, and again with no awareness of when this may all end. So this is new to all of us, at least in some respects. And even if you were a complete hermit before, realizing that the rest of the world is in a different space means even for you this is a different space in terms of how you can interact with them or what other people around you can do. So it's a time particularly to be nice to yourself. This is the early stages still of the learning curve. You shouldn't be expected to be doing everything perfectly and to a T and working smoothly. These are opportunities for more learning and more growth. These are not opportunities, well, they are opportunities to beat yourself up or be mean to yourself, but that doesn't help you or anyone else. Her second point was be nice to others in your space. And, you know, that's sort of obvious and common, but again, all of us can get so focused on what's in front of our face, particularly with ADHD, that we can be abrupt, we can be irritable, we can be short with the people around us. They may have annoying habits, some of which you may be aware of before, but now you can't escape it if they're, you know, tapping their desk with their fingers or have other habits that are intruding on you. But remembering, trying to be nice to others in your space is going to be, you're going to keep living with these people in this space. So it's to your best interest if the situation, if the interactions are kept as possible, as positive as possible. And so that's about all I have to say about being nice to others. Her third big point, and I was getting at some of this before about, in terms of the time dimension, that this is not going to go on forever, but it's a reminder you are not alone. Even if you are physically alone in a little space, remember other people in the world are sharing these difficulties right now, and not just dozens, it's hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions of people across the globe are dealing with very similar difficulties and restraints, and almost certainly many of those are dealing with much more dire situations than you are. I mean, many of them are told to be alone when they're homeless and on the street and don't have any shelter. But remember, you're not alone in this. And if you're having problems or difficulties, reaching out on the phone, reaching out to the people who you're sharing space with, looking on the internet. Again, the Attitude magazine has already several dozen blogs they're putting on. I mean, it's helpful to know other people are dealing with this exact same difficulty. And then the last of the social points is something I was touching on earlier. This is an opportunity to learn for you what works, you know, what approaches to work, what workspace, what tools for dealing with time management are helpful for you. If they're helpful in this time and setting, almost certainly they're going to be helpful when we get through this, and they are probably good and useful life skills to learn. So that's pretty much the end of my formal presentation. So I'm going to be open to questions in a minute too. So again, we touched on taking your meds consistently if you were taking meds, to maintaining some aspect of physical activity in your life, and then 3, this theme about space, having a specific workspace, making sure others know that's your workspace, and really using it for your work. And on a theme of time, it's keeping track of time, which is difficult to begin with, but using alarms or other systems, and making sure you're taking breaks during the day and during workflow, making sure you're eating, and making sure you are ending work time at the end of the day. And then the fifth and last element was social aspects of the sheltering in space, and being nice to yourself, being nice to others, setting boundaries, but doing it politely but firmly. And this is all a learning situation for all of us. So that's the presentation, and I will look for questions or comments right now. Anything? I think people can type in comments, and it may be, hopefully, maybe I was so clear and explicit and cogent that nothing needed further explanation, but are there things anyone wants to explore further? Or should I give a So I'll start riffing on a few other topics. I mean, one difficulty of this work environment for all of us, but that's intensified for people with ADHD, is that people with ADHD are driven to variety, driven to what's interesting rather than necessarily what's important. And being in a confined space, having limited interactions certainly makes that hard to bear. As one of my patients who was trying to combine going stir crazy and going bananas burst out, we're all going, said effing, we're all going effing stir bananas, which is my phrase to use for this situation. So one way to get out of that is to consciously cultivate either new talents or new abilities or interests that you were wanting to do for years. I mean, one of my daughters has had a ukulele sitting around for 4 or 5 years, and she's taking now the time to play it. There's certainly other people who are using musical talents or exploring interests in genealogy on the internet or doing something that they had wanted to do, reading books that are on their bookshelf, cleaning out bookshelves. I mean, that's a huge one right now that I hear lots of people. I finally cleaned out that closet. Another way of sort of bringing variety into your life is that there are a host of sites. Randomize.com is one that if you can't think of anything new or different on yourself, you can type in randomize.com, I think is the name of the site. I think it's Googleable. So you can go to the internet to provide something new that you wouldn't have thought of looking up yourself. I know there's other approaches of picking 4 random words and throwing them into Google and seeing what you get, but sometimes even being random is difficult if you've been practicing. I mean, if our minds tend to come up with the same ideas over and over again. In terms of, again, reading books you haven't wanted to read before, I'll make a push for reading my book. A minute or two on that. The point of my whole book is to get more people to understand what ADHD is and looks like, because there are so many people who have heard the term and don't understand what it is. And there's also pretty clearly an age gradient there. So the younger you are, the more likely you are not only to know it, but to know some substantial information about it. And particularly when you get my age or older, lots of older adults may not even be that familiar with the term, and many of them still think it's only something that kids go through. So my main, and what I did is use Donald Trump as an exemplar of ADHD, because He has it unequivocally. I mean, objectively, you can count all the symptoms he fully meets and demonstrates on a daily basis. And he's one figure that's in front of our face that people see every day, and almost any other example I could come up with is certainly much more obscure, so I couldn't refer to events or issues or things that that person did and have everyone understand and know what they did. The flip side, the book not only uses ADHD to explain, or uses Donald Trump to explain ADHD to people, it uses ADHD to explain Donald Trump, because I would argue if you don't understand that piece of him, then he's just a confusing mishmash of highly inconsistent, contradictory behaviors. And that is true whether you're a fan of his or whether you're an opponent of his, that the ADD lens is an effective way of understanding better why he does much of what he does. So I'm not saying it's responsible for the content of his policies, and there are certainly aspects of him that are not specific to ADHD. So there are narcissistic strands, or there seems to be at times some obliviousness to his actions or the impact on others. And then the third part of my book is that our whole world is getting more ADHD-like, and that part of that is feedback loops and circles, and some of it is how social media and computers are changing our lives so that we are prompted to respond to what's immediate, what's fast, what's dramatic, what's emotional, rather than the older book world or direct human interaction world where we had more time to explore things in detail. So good, I see some questions there. So I don't know whether actually everyone can see the question or whether I should read it out loud, but Lana, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, says, for those of us working on college classes from home for the first time, do you have any tips on how to schedule for class time and homework time? I'm having a hard time not working from morning to bedtime every day. Do you think scheduling school time more like a workday would be beneficial? So a good point she brings in is that lots of what I'm saying again isn't just specific to the workplace. The school, there's very clear parallels to the workplace. And again, hopefully next week's presentation, I want to do it completely on scheduling. So I may be raining on my parade or cutting short. But yes, I would emphatically say everyone, actually, whether they're working, whether in school, whether they're doing none of that, should be scheduling. Some of the principles of scheduling, I mean, one is writing it down and being specific, because if you just say, oh, I'm going to do X, Y, Z in the afternoon or later never shows up on the calendar, on the watch, any other place, so it's easy to keep putting it off. So putting in blocks of time, and I wouldn't schedule any single activity for much more, probably not, up to an hour at a time. If you think you're going to sit there for 3 hours and work on calculus problems, maybe you can, maybe you will, but more likely you're setting yourself up for 20 minutes of calculus problems and 10 minutes of saying, oh my God, I can't stand this any longer, it's so boring, and 2.5 hours of, oh, this is an interesting video here. So knowing your own capacity for attending to the information and what the task itself requires, I would put in blocks of time with space of anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes between these blocks, so that your body gets a break, so that you get to go to the bathroom and get to drink some water. You might eat something small, but that you disrupt some of that routine so it's not getting boring and stale. I'd say the other tips, I mean, I would definitely use an alarm system. Again, not just relying on your own ability to look at a clock or know what time is going on to remind you when it's time out, when it's time to move on to something else, or including just time to take a break. When you are figuring out what to schedule when, I mean, it's worth spending a minute or two to know, how your brain works, what's most interesting to you, when you are most on the ball I mean, many people with ADHD are not particularly morning people, that their brain does seem to work more effectively and fluidly later in the day. So if that's your style or approach, you may want to put some of the more challenging problems later in the day rather than facing them first thing. Um, that's about all I can say off the top of my mind about time management for school. I will touch on. Okay. So thanks for the feedback. One of the other things I'll be talking more about next time, and it sounds like you're at least acknowledging or mentioning there is a bedtime. Consistency with sleep time is one of the most beneficial things you can do for keeping your brain working efficiently. So I've been video conferencing most of my patients. I actually am still seeing a few patients live, but many video conferencing, and I've been surprised at how many people in 3 in the afternoon are still in their pajamas, bathrobe, or they haven't gotten dressed, they haven't gotten up for the day, and some of them have just woken up. So again, I know particularly people with ADHD tend to be night owls, tend to stay up later and later, and that can keep drifting. But a really important thing is to keep a regular wake up time, keep a regular go to bed time, and to help accentuate that and make the differences between daytime and nighttime more distinct, it is good to have rituals where you are taking your bath, taking your shower, doing whatever it is, switching from night clothes to day clothes, so you are signaling to yourself, yes, I'm here, yes, I'm ready to work, yes, I'm ready to be engaged. Um, any other thoughts or questions? I guess I'll leave it open for a minute or two, and then if nothing else comes up, I will close it for today. If nothing comes up in the next minute, again, next week, Friday at 11, I will address, I guess, in a more structured, organized, and central way, scheduling and both why it's so important for not just those of us with ADHD, but for everybody, and um, some tips and advice on how to go about doing it, expanding on what I mentioned or responded to Lana's comments just now. My understanding is this Facebook Live will be available for other people to read or not read, to look at. In the future, it will be on this website. So if you didn't catch it live, you can watch it as soon as we're finished. And I think I will be wrapping it up for now. So thank you for showing up. If you felt there was something of value here, certainly you are welcome to let other people know about it. Again, I am brand new to all of the to doing any of this Facebook Live or presentation on the internet. So if there are technical things I haven't, if I didn't set the privacy or access settings correctly, or there's production flaws, let me know about those if you want. And again, if there's specific questions you want to ask ahead of time, I can tailor what I'm going to be saying to them next time. So be safe, be sane, and take care of yourself. And that's all for this week. Bye.